before I get onto that more practical side of our talk, and I would say the book follows this same pattern, I want to make another note about history. It seems to me that magic, what I define as causative ritual, has been present in the human situation from time immemorial. And I would go one step further, and I'm going to explain this very carefully. The magical effort is part of pre-human history as well, by which I mean it is part of the life and the culture of pre-sapiens, of Neanderthal beings, Neanderthal men and women. Not exactly human, very, very close in nature to us. They are our closest ancestors on the evolutionary chain, but they are Homo neanderthalis. They are simian. They are pre-sapiens. They were different from us, very close, but different. They had a different skeletal structure. They had a different uh, cranium structure. They had a different gait. They very possibly, we don't really know, presumably mated with Homo sapiens, and here we are today. But that's theoretical. What we do know, what we do know, is that Neanderthal men and women, the last of whom seem to have died out about 40,000 years ago, did have a spirituality, a magical spirituality that we 21st century people would recognize as such. Now, dig this. We've only known about the existence of our Neanderthal ancestors since the mid 19th century, not very long ago. And since that time, uh, archaeologists affiliated with museums, universities, and so forth have discovered that Neanderthal men and women produced what could be described as talismans. Talismans. Um, these might be eagle talons or bear claws that were worn as necklaces, just as I'm wearing right now. And these things are presumed to have been petitions for help in the hunt. This was a hunter-gatherer society, and the hunt and the success of the hunt was the dividing line between life and death, not only for individuals, but for entire communities. They also had, and this is mind-blowing to me, and you can see pictures of this online. We have hundreds of them. They fashioned little statuettes, maybe about 4 inches high, something like that. Little statuettes in a bulbous female form, not looking at all like Neanderthals as we understand them, because in a hunter-gatherer society, you didn't have overfed people. I can assure you that. And so these figurines are in a bulbous feminine form with pendulous breasts and a large middle, suggestive of a pregnant woman. And in the mid 19th century, archaeologists started calling these things Venus figurines. Of course, Venus being a goddess that wasn't emergent for many in the form that we recognize, was not emergent until many, many millennia later, but tens of millennia later. But this being the mid 19th century, Victorian age or near Victorian age, scientists term these statuettes Venus figurines. We have hundreds of them in museums and universities around the world. And it's presumed that these were fertility talismans. Again, very different in appearance from men and women in a hunter-gatherer society who were, if anything, underfed and undernourished a lot of the time. And the Venus figurines are such a wild departure. They remind me a little bit of those beautiful, big, chubby statues of Buddha or Budai that started to appear in the 11th century in China. The big grinning Buddha, fat, happy, as is symbol of good luck. They were not dissimilar. They were not dissimilar. And the presumption that these were fertility statues demonstrates that even our pre-human ancestors sought petitionary relationships with um, extra-physical entities. I was going to say non-human intelligences, but the Neanderthals were non-human intelligences, and shows you can't use these words too fast and easy. And I was so moved by this, I cried, when I first discovered this fact, because think of it. Think of it. Here we are meeting over some sort of digital magic of zeros and ones arranged in a particular order. Talk about magic in the 21st century. And stuff that we do. I'll bet half of you are wearing talismanic necklaces, is identifiable in our pre-human ancestors. What a beautiful, beautiful connection. What a beautiful, beautiful connection. And it seems to me that what this tells us, in addition to the intrinsic connections between life forms on our planet, bipedal life forms at least, and probably all life forms, what this tells us is not only that we had a shared set of interests, but it validates the spiritual appeal, the extra physical appeal, as revelatory and true. Because it can't just be a matter of social conditioning, right? Neanderthal men and women had a very different set of cultural concerns, social concerns, than we do, or than our ancestors in antiquity even did. And it can't just be brain biology, the oft-heard argument that it's just this and that neurological area lighting up in the brain, which I think fails on several levels, but this adds a historical failure, which is that presumably Neanderthal men and women had a different brain chemistry than we do. They certainly had a different atmosphere in which intellect functioned, and they had a different sized cranium. Their brain biology was different. It's simply a fact. So it can't just be conditioning or TED Talk style brain biology. I swore I'd never get one of these TED Talk headsets, but I gave in. I was asked to improve the sound, and so I gave in. But that's as far as TED Talk stuff is going to go on this presentation. The whole neuroscience is destiny thing doesn't explain spirituality, and it fails on several levels, but it fails historically, and I work as a historian because we're seeing activity among our Neanderthal ancestors that is so like our own, it's uncanny. It's uncanny. And if you trace the magical effort through later stages of antiquity, it's ubiquitous. You find it in scripture. One of the things I write about in the book is that in the book of Exodus, in the Hebrew Bible, one of the earliest books of the Hebrew Bible, Joseph, who was supposed to be a Class A dream interpreter,